Millfield has always struck me as a town forgotten by time, a place where the past clings to the present with a vengeance. When I moved here in search of a more relaxed pace of life after retiring, I was immediately captivated by its history and the air of mystery that seemed to surround every corner. The town, situated on the banks of the River Brook, still proudly displays the marks of its industrial era. The old factories, now silent and covered in ivy, are shadows of their former selves. But it was the disused railway station that really caught my attention. Once the beating heart of Millfield, it now lies abandoned, with rusting tracks and deserted platforms overgrown with vegetation. Walking through it was like stepping into a time capsule. The stories that locals told about the railway line did nothing to dispel the aura of melancholy that hung over the place. It was the perfect setting for a mystery, and as a lover of urban legends and mysteries, I was irresistibly drawn to it. Soon, I learned about the legend of the ghost train. It was said that on foggy nights, a spectral train would emerge from the abandoned tracks, reenacting a terrible accident that had occurred in 1927. On that fateful night, a train derailed on a sharp bend, killing all passengers on board, including an influential railroad magnate, Thomas Blackwood. Locals spoke of lights flickering in the distance, the sounds of metal grinding, and screams of despair echoing in the darkness. Each tale was more terrifying than the last, and it wasn't long before my curiosity turned into an almost obsessive need to discover the truth behind these stories. Millfield, with its haunted atmosphere and ghost stories, seemed like a place where the past never really died. As I delved deeper into the legend of the ghost train, I realized that there was something deeper and darker behind the spectral apparitions. Each clue, each tale, pulled me deeper into the mystery. The disused railway line was not just a monument to Millfield's industrial past, but a gateway to ancient secrets waiting to be unearthed. I'm John, a retired railway engineer with over 30 years' experience in the industry. My life has been spent maintaining and operating trains, and after so many years working in the hustle and bustle of big cities, I decided it was time to seek some peace and quiet. I retired and looked for a place where I could reconnect with the tranquility I had always craved. Millfield seemed like the perfect choice. The town, with its old-world charm and slow pace, offered exactly what I was looking for, a haven away from the chaos of the city. Ever since I was young, I have always been fascinated by mysteries and urban legends. Stories of ghosts, apparitions and unexplained phenomena have always captured my imagination. During my travels around the country, I have worked on various railway lines, and each small town had its own intriguing stories. Millfield was no different. The legend of the ghost train that haunted the town's disused tracks was something I could not ignore. My passion for mysteries has led me to investigate many legends over the years, but the story of the Millfield ghost train had something special. Perhaps it was the combination of the town's atmosphere, with its abandoned factories and fog-shrouded streets, or perhaps it was the tragic story of the 1927 crash that added an extra layer of urgency and sadness to each account. Either way, I knew I couldn't just listen to these stories without trying to uncover the truth behind them. So, with my love of railways and my fascination with mysteries, I dove headfirst into the investigation. I spent hours at the local library, poring over old records and yellowed newspapers. I spoke to older residents, listening intently to each story, each sigh of fear and wonder. Each piece of the ghost train story seemed to fit together perfectly, forming a dark and intriguing puzzle that I was determined to solve. Millfield offered me the peace of mind I was seeking, but it also presented me with a mystery that piqued my curiosity and gave me new purpose. I knew that to find the peace I craved, I needed to understand the history of the ghost train, uncover the secrets buried in the rusted tracks, and perhaps help bring some kind of closure to the restless spirits that still seem to haunt the town. And so, with my camera and recorder in hand, I began my journey. Each step along the disused tracks brought me closer to the truth, and each foggy night promised revelations that could change everything I thought I knew about Millfield and its legends. The locals of Millfield had many stories to tell about the ghost train. Whenever I mentioned my interest in the old railway line, people would come up to me with looks of mixed fascination and fear, ready to share their experiences. One of the most common reports was of a train that would suddenly appear on nights of thick fog, followed by the sounds of creaking metal and agonized screams that echoed through the night. Some claimed to have seen flickering lights in the distance, as if the headlights of the train were approaching, only to mysteriously disappear. One night, I decided that I had heard enough stories and that it was time to investigate for myself. Curiosity was consuming me, and I needed to see for myself what was happening on the abandoned tracks. I waited for a particularly foggy night, when the atmosphere seemed perfect for the ghost train to appear. With a torch and my recorder in hand, I made my way to the crash site, where the rusty tracks disappeared into the darkness. When I arrived, an eerie feeling came over me. The temperature seemed to drop precipitously, and the thick fog enveloped everything around me, making every step a lonely journey through a sea of white. The silence was overwhelming, broken only by the distant sound of dry leaves being trampled. It was then that I began to perceive vaguely outlined figures at the edge of my field of vision. They seemed to be human shadows, moving slowly between the trees and the tracks. My heart beat faster as I approached the exact site of the accident. The air was charged with a heavy, oppressive energy, almost tangible. The glimpses of ghostly figures continued, and for a moment, I swore I heard the distant sound of a train whistle, faint and full of sadness. My flashlight momentarily failed, plunging me into total darkness, and when the light returned, the figures had disappeared, as if they had never been there. I returned home that night with more questions than answers, but with a renewed certainty, something truly strange was happening on the Millfield tracks. The locals' accounts were not just stories to scare children, there was a real and unsettling presence in the place. From that moment on, my investigation intensified. I was determined to uncover the truth, not only to satisfy my own curiosity, but also to understand what was keeping these spirits trapped in such a tragic and distant event. Each new account and each visit to the crash site revealed more layers of this dark mystery. And the deeper I delved, the more I realized that I was about to uncover secrets that many would rather keep buried. The truth about the Millfield ghost train was getting closer, and I was determined to be the first to bring it to light. Determined to better understand what might be behind the ghost train, I began delving deep into Millfield's historical archives. I spent hours in the town's small library, sifting through boxes of old documents and yellowed newspapers. The railway's records were also crucial to my research. There were stacks of dusty papers detailing everything from train routes to maintenance work carried out over the years. Among the documents, I found several reports and newspaper clippings about the 1927 accident. The pages described in disturbing detail how the train derailed on a sharp curve, resulting in the instant death of all passengers on board. The accident was portrayed as an unprecedented tragedy for the town and the railway. I was engrossed in the accounts of survivors and victims' families, which added emotional weight to my research. As I continued to investigate, I discovered a revealing piece of information: the crashed train was not just carrying ordinary passengers. Its cargo included valuable materials and important documents related to a major business transaction. Furthermore, the train was carrying Thomas Blackwood, an influential railroad magnate. Blackwood was known for his political connections and his key role in the development of the railroad network. The revelation of the valuable cargo and Blackwood's presence on the train added a new layer to the mystery. It was clear that there was more to the accident than just an operational error. Blackwood, with his influence and power, would have been a valuable target, and the secret cargo seemed to invite intrigue. With this new information, I began to consider the possibility of sabotage. The idea of a corporate conspiracy began to take shape. There were a number of clues that suggested that the accident might have been planned to hide crucial information or eliminate key personnel. The cargo the train was carrying seemed to be a central point of interest for anyone wanting to ensure that certain documents and assets did not fall into the wrong hands. As I reviewed the old documents and correspondence, I noticed discrepancies and gaps in the official explanations of the accident. Some records suggested that there had been some lapses in the maintenance of the tracks, but there was enough evidence to raise doubts as to whether these failures were truly accidental. The possibility of a darker, more deliberate plan began to take shape in my mind. This discovery raised even more questions about who might benefit from the death of Thomas Blackwood and the destruction of the cargo. As I unraveled more of the conspiracy, I realized that the Millfield ghost train was not just an urban legend, but a manifestation of a buried secret that, if revealed, could change the history of Millfield forever. The next step would be to follow these clues and discover who was behind it all, and why. On my next visit to the crash site, the atmosphere was even thicker, with fog enveloping everything like an oppressive shroud. The night felt eerily still, and the silence seemed to heighten every small sound around me. I walked slowly along the rusty tracks, my heart pounding faster with each step. The sense of anticipation was almost palpable, as if something imminent was about to happen. It was then that I heard the first sign, a high-pitched, metallic sound, as if a train were approaching. At first, I thought it might be a figment of my mind, an illusion brought on by anxiety. But the sound grew louder, accompanied by a deep creaking sound that seemed to come from the tracks and the metal structures around them. The noise was familiar, an echo of memories from years of working with trains, but there was an ominous quality to it that I could not ignore. The fog began to roil, and in the center of the darkness, I began to see a hazy shape materializing. It was a train, but not just any train. The headlights glowed eerily, casting a pale glow through the thick fog. The train looked ancient, with period carriages and a worn appearance, as if it had been plucked straight from a nightmare. The sight was almost surreal, as if the past had come back to haunt the present. The sounds of grinding metal mingled with distant, agonized screams. They were the cries of desperate passengers, echoing through the fog and filling the air with a sense of utter despair. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, and I was immersed in a cacophony of panic and terror. It was as if the train carried with it the very essence of the tragedy that had occurred so long ago. The train slowly passed me, its wheels seeming to glide over the tracks without actually touching them. Each carriage seemed empty, but I felt an oppressive, desperate presence within each one. The sense of tragedy and despair was so intense that I could almost touch it. The presence of the spirits of the passengers and the valuable cargo seemed to hover in the air, shrouded in endless sadness. As the train disappeared into the mist, silence returned, but with a deeper weight and sense of loss than I had ever experienced before. The experience was more than just frightening, it was a direct connection to Millfield's tragic past. The sight of the ghost train and the sounds that accompanied it left me with a sense of urgency. I knew I needed to understand more deeply what had caused this tragedy and why these spirits were still trapped, reliving their cruel fate. What I had witnessed that night was not just a supernatural manifestation, but a desperate cry for justice and revelation. After my supernatural experience, the sense of urgency to find out the truth intensified. The idea that the 1927 accident might have been deliberate sabotage began to take hold in my mind. The accounts of locals and my own experience with the ghost train pointed to something more sinister than a simple accident. Determined to follow this lead, I began searching for documents and evidence that might confirm my suspicions. I spent hours reviewing old records at the local library and in the railroad archives. Each document seemed to add a new piece to the puzzle, but it also added to the complexity of the mystery. Some reports mentioned maintenance failures and operational errors, but these were often contradicted by other evidence that suggested something was amiss. It was during one of these searches that I discovered a hidden compartment in the library, filled with documents that appeared to have been forgotten for decades. Among the bills and correspondence, I found an old diary, covered in dust and hidden in a file box. The diary belonged to Thomas Blackwood, the railroad magnate who was on board the train at the time of the accident. Upon opening the diary, I was immediately struck by its contents. The pages were filled with Blackwood's detailed notes and personal thoughts. Reading the first few pages revealed a growing concern about anonymous threats and mentions of a conspiracy within the railroad industry. Blackwood had documented suspicions of sabotage and corporate rivalries that could be linked to his own accident. As I flipped through the pages, I found incriminating notes about secret meetings and correspondence between Blackwood and other powerful figures in the industry. He had written about a series of strange incidents and unexplained failures that had occurred in the weeks leading up to the accident. These failures, according to his observations, did not appear to be accidental, but rather planned to create a dangerous situation. The diary also contained details about a valuable cargo that Blackwood was transporting and about crucial documents that could expose corruption and illegal practices within the railroad. It was clear that Blackwood had made himself a target because of his knowledge and influence. The diary provided an intimate insight into the tensions and threats surrounding Blackwood, and confirmed that the sabotage may have been a deliberate strategy to silence him and destroy the evidence he was carrying. With this new information, my investigation took a more definite turn. The connection between the accident and the corporate conspiracy was becoming increasingly clear. I needed to put the final pieces of this puzzle together and discover who was behind the sabotage, and what their ultimate purpose was. The revelation that the 1927 accident was sabotage and not just a tragic accident made the mission all the more urgent and personal. The truth needed to be brought to light, not only to bring peace to restless spirits, but to right an injustice that had endured for nearly a century. With the evidence in hand, I knew it was time to prepare for the big reveal. The conference was scheduled for the following day, and I had enlisted the help of Robert Blackwood, a descendant of Thomas Blackwood. Robert, like me, was determined to expose the truth about the 1927 crash and the crucial role his ancestor had played. We combined our efforts to present our findings and make public the evidence of sabotage and conspiracy. As we prepared our presentation, we faced a barrage of threats and intimidation. Living descendants of the conspirators, powerful figures in the railroad industry, and corporations that had benefited from the crash all tried to intimidate us in various ways. We received anonymous phone calls and threatening messages, and the atmosphere around us was tense. Each attempt to silence us only strengthened our determination to bring the truth to light. The night before the conference, the anxiety and fear were palpable. Robert and I reviewed the documents and rehearsed our presentation, trying to stay focused. Then, suddenly, the atmosphere around us began to change. The dense fog once again enveloped the place, and a familiar sense of unease began to set in. As I gazed out the window, I saw the ghost train materialize in the fog, like a vision of the past coming to life once again. But this time, the train felt different. There was no longer the same terror associated with its appearance. Instead, the air was filled with a sense of completion and gratitude. The spirits of the passengers, those who had been condemned to wander through time, began to manifest. They were visibly calmer, as if a great burden of sadness and despair was beginning to lift. The ghostly figures floated around the train, their expressions peaceful and relieved. There was a sense of collective gratitude. I could see that the work we were about to do would not only bring justice to the living, but would also begin to free these spirits who had been trapped for so long. The appearance of the ghost train and the spirits seemed to be a sign that the truth was about to be revealed, and that there would finally be some kind of resolution to the tragedy. As the spirits gradually began to disappear, the atmosphere around me became lighter, as if an invisible weight was being lifted. The sense of gratitude emanating from the apparitions was tangible, and I knew we were on the right track. The upcoming conference was not only an event to expose the truth, but also an opportunity to bring peace to both the living and the departed. With the preparations complete and the support of the spirits seemingly confirmed, I felt more confident than ever. I was ready to face the challenges ahead and to ensure that the truth about the 1927 crash and the conspiracy surrounding it would finally be revealed to the world. On the day of the conference, the room was packed with journalists, historians, and locals from Millfield, all eager to hear what Robert Blackwood and I had to say. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation and nervousness. With the documents and evidence carefully arranged, we began our presentation. Robert and I laid out every detail of the conspiracy, starting with the 1927 accident and the discovery of the documents in Thomas Blackwood's diary. We showed how the accident had not been a simple mistake, but a deliberate act of sabotage involving senior railway executives who sought to eliminate Blackwood and destroy crucial evidence. We presented old records, correspondence and testimonies that proved the plot that had been hidden for so long. As we revealed the truth, the reactions from the community were mixed. Many were shocked and outraged, unable to believe that a tragic event that had been dismissed as a simple accident could have been manipulated so cruelly. Others expressed relief and gratitude at finally knowing the truth about what really happened. The revelation had a profound impact, not only revealing corruption and injustice, but also offering a new perspective on the history of Millfield. As the conference drew to a close, a sense of peace seemed to settle over the room. The truth, finally exposed, shed new light on the past. This revelation seemed to have an almost immediate effect on the spirits of the passengers on the ghost train. The apparitions I had seen earlier began to dissipate with a sense of closure. The oppressive energy that had enveloped the site during my investigation was now transforming into an aura of calm and gratitude. Reflecting on my journey, I felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. The search for the truth had not only been a personal mission, but also a way to bring justice and peace to those who had suffered unjustly. The feeling of having solved an ancient mystery and given voice to stories that had been silenced was invaluable. The lasting impact of the revelation was evident in the community and in myself. Millfield came to see the 1927 accident not just as a tragedy, but as an example of how truth can prevail even in the face of corruption and deceit. The truth about the ghost train and the conspiracy brought new understanding to all involved, and the spirits of the passengers were finally able to rest in peace. The experience taught me that the search for truth can be challenging and painful, but it is also essential to righting injustices and bringing peace. The lasting impact of this revelation will be remembered for generations, and my personal journey will be remembered as a reminder that even in the shadows of the past, there is always a light that can illuminate the path to justice. The atmosphere in Millfield, as always, was a mixture of quaint charm and a touch of desolation. The town, with its narrow streets and old houses, seemed to have a rich history and, at the same time, a sense of stagnation. The railway tracks, now disused, wound through fields and trees, silent witnesses to a busy past. The town setting was essentially urban, but with an air of nostalgia and abandonment that added to the mystery of the ghost train. The technical details about the railway were crucial to understanding the accident. The railway had been a major transport artery in the 1920s, with sturdy tracks and locomotives designed to handle heavy loads. However, lack of proper maintenance and faulty signaling systems made the railway prone to accidents, especially in adverse weather conditions. The 1927 accident was aggravated by a sharp curve and a series of negligences that, according to records, were common at the time. The once proud and modern railway had fallen into disrepair over time, reflecting the decline that was affecting the city itself. The documents found were of paramount importance in unraveling the conspiracy. Thomas Blackwood's diary contained meticulous notes and confidential correspondence that detailed not only his concerns about sabotage, but also evidence of a large-scale corporate conspiracy. The papers included reports of secret meetings, falsified maintenance plans, and communications between railway executives and influential politicians. These documents revealed the lengths to which those involved were willing to go to protect their interests and silence anyone who might threaten their schemes. The emotions and motivations of the characters involved were complex and deeply human. Thomas Blackwood, with his prominent position, was motivated by the desire to protect his reputation and ensure the integrity of his operations. His decision to keep a diary and collect evidence was an attempt to protect himself from threats and to ensure that the truth was not completely lost. Robert Blackwood, his descendant, was motivated by a sense of duty to his predecessor and a desire to right the wrongs of the past, preserve the memory of his grandfather and bring justice to the town. The conspirators, on the other hand, were driven by greed and fear. Their interests lay in protecting their financial advantage and avoiding the legal consequences of their actions. Sabotage and manipulation of evidence were carried out in order to conceal corruption and ensure that its secrets remained buried. The conspirators' motivation was a mixture of unbridled ambition and a lust for power that led them to commit acts of extreme cruelty. The investigation and revelation of the truth involved a range of intense emotions. For John, the journey was marked by a mixture of determination and anxiety, as he faced the challenges and threats of those involved in the conspiracy. The search for the truth was also a path of self-discovery and personal fulfillment. The community of Millfield experienced relief and a sense of delayed justice, reflecting the complexity and depth of emotions involved in revealing a long-hidden truth.